You're still muted, Carrie. There
Great.
you go.
Okay, I was just getting the recording going. So Alan was much better at multitasking this stuff than I am, but I will get there. Okay. Jerry Glazer.
I'm here.
Alex Goodman.
Here.
Dina Allen.
Here.
Joshua Somin. I apologize for any mispronunciations. Please correct me so I get it right in the future.
So many, technically.
Somin. Okay. Kenna Lee.
Here. Did you
Sarah
hear me?
Elliott. Yep.
Here.
Sarah Elliott.
Here.
Sunali. And if you could just pronounce the rest of your name, I'd appreciate it.
Howdy, Sunali Shanti Sikand.
Thank you. Woody Hastings.
I'm here, and you pronounced it right.
Thank you. Thank you for having an easy one. I shouldn't talk. Everyone gets my last name wrong. Lizalette Pierce.
Right here. Lisa's fine.
Lisa's fine. Okay, great. And then Luke Lindenbush.
Here.
All right. And Diana Rich and Sarah Gurney are not in attendance as of now.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Dina is going to kick us off with an inspiration.
Okay, so I find my inspiration being out in nature mostly, and what really keeps me going is knowing activists and environmentalists, especially my daughters and their peers. And the part of a quote that I will share with you is from a Native American activist that's trying to stop pipeline number 5. And it has to do with the work we're doing. And she said, to feed the world, we want to inhabit. So I think that's what we're all trying to do here.
Thank you so much. All right, so we're gonna, I will review the action items from the last meeting. Diana was gonna move SB 99 onto council. I believe that she has taken the steps to do that, our SB 99 recommendation of support. I was to send out a survey, which I have sent out and very few of you have answered. Thank you, Woody. I have developed the PowerPoint that I'll be sharing later in the meeting as a draft of our council presentation. Sunali was to take her art project back to the proposal drawing board to come up with more details, and I believe she's going to be presenting that at a future meeting. And Dina was taking her sequestration proposal back to the drawing board, and you received that in your packet. So that's the review from last meeting. Now I'd like to open it to comments from the public regarding any items not on the agenda.
All right. And do you want me
to before you do that, just a fast question. Kenna, you said, thank you, Woody. Is that the only response you got? Because I know I filled it out too. I'm just wondering if the survey worked okay.
Oh, I'll double check. Woody was the only person that emailed me and said he filled it out, but
Because I had filled it out as well. It was immediately after it was sent in.
Yeah, me, I did as well. I did too.
Okay, I'll go back in there. Look, you're all so much more compliant than I thought. Thank you. Carrie, if you could manage this.
I will do that. And first note that we have not received any email comments for this committee in the past couple weeks. And I do see Zena has a public comment. And do you want we have 3 minutes for public comment. Do you want a 30-second warning?
Sorry, I have a public comment.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I was confused. Yeah, so in March, this Regional Climate Protection Authority adopted a strategy plan. Yesterday, the Board of Supervisors met to set direction by the county. So I want to kind of encourage the committee and the city of Sebastopol to really closely work with these more resource-rich entities in the area to get things forward. I think it's really important that we coordinate, we work together, we use resources that they have, we offer our own perspective, but climate, I mean, everybody knows it's not something that has borders, and responses to climate action doesn't have borders either. So I would like to do that. I'd like to see the city and the committee kind of get more knowledgeable about what the direction is of the authority of the county and of cities like Petaluma. The other thing I quickly want to mention, you mentioned already that there's going to be a workshop at 4 o'clock. And I think climate is not a big issue there. And I saw Moody is speaking, but he is speaking in the section environment. And I think that's, I can understand maybe the programming went that way, but I think there's also something to kind of be mindful of, that a lot of people frame a climate issue as an environmental problem. And in a way, it is more a social economic problem. I mean, it's a problem that covers everything, but if you really want to get an understanding of it, you cannot just, I think, see it as part of environment and the environmentalists being concerned about that. It affects important social and economic issues in our society. Thank you.
Carrie, you're muted.
Sorry, Woody has his hands up. Woody, do you want to go next?
Woody, you're muted too.
Yeah, thanks. I actually have two brief comments now. The first is, so is there a need? I mean, it would be great if we had lots of public coming to these meetings, but given the past difficulty we had, I'm just wondering if do we assess who is on the call? Do people need to identify themselves? Because I do see one person there that I'm not sure who it is. Just a first name there and no last name. So, with camera off. So just asking that question. And then just to clarify my role, I mean, I actually, so I agree with what Zeno just said about the sort of the nature of the climate crisis and what kind of issue it is. I was invited to facilitate, moderate a panel of environmentalists on this, and so it's not me speaking. I don't have a presentation of substance, and it's not me presenting the climate issue as though it's simply an environmental issue. I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, so to address your first question, Woody, we have not developed any kind of policy about requiring people to identify themselves with camera, because there could be equity issue, like just issues with people having access to the appropriate technology to show themselves on camera. And we can't close the meeting to anyone who wants to enter unless there's someone that we know has disrupted in the past. So I agree that it is nicer if people are willing to put their last names or turn their camera on if they have the capability of doing that. But I don't believe we can require it at this time. And Carrie, feel free to contradict me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's correct. Kind of as a public meeting, it is open to whoever wants to attend, and people are allowed to. I mean, I have a planning commissioner who calls in, and you never see her face because she's a call-in user. That is an acceptable means of participating.
That's fine. Thanks. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
All right, so I believe that is the end of the public comment, unless there's someone else that would like to speak up right now before we move on. All right, we'll keep going. Do we have any statements of conflict of interest from anyone on the committee at this time? I don't see anyone waving their arms around. All right, so we'll move on to our regular agenda. Oh, I forgot to read our important notice. Sorry, I'm going to read it now, a little bit late. So this is important notice regarding city meetings. This meeting is being conducted utilizing teleconferencing and electronic means consistent with the state of California executive orders regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. Zoom is being utilized for this meeting. In case of technical issues, meetings will be uploaded to the city website as soon as possible after this meeting. We will be conducting today's meeting in a virtual setting using Zoom. Committee members and staff are participating from remote locations, practicing appropriate social distancing. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting by use of Zoom as noted on the city's website and as noted on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to speak to the Climate Action Committee may do so during public comment or may comment on agenda items during the discussion of each item and must be logged into Zoom. Anyone using abusive, vulgar, offensive, threatening, or harassing language, personal attacks of any kind, or offensive terms that target specific individuals or groups will be muted and removed from the meeting. Please do not abuse this new way to provide public comment. All right, so moving on to the regular agenda, I see Woody is already posting in the chat. If you don't have your chat window open, some documentation of support, and take it away, Woody, regarding AB 965. You're muted.
That was weird. I just clicked it and it didn't unmute. So yes, to refresh folks' memory, this is a bill by our own Assemblymember Mark Levine, and it's aiming at improving EV charging, getting the Housing and Community Development Department to develop standards to have EV charging at multi-unit dwellings and non-residential buildings. It was just in the Appropriations Committee today, and my understanding is it's been placed in the suspense file, so it's still alive. It could hopefully get out of the Appropriations Committee, which is a fiscal committee. And so long story short, it's going to be there. It's not clear on whenever something's in this committee, it's very hard to know what's happening. That's where they sort of discuss what bills are going to survive and what bills are going to die without a lot of public involvement in those discussions, unfortunately. And this is, because the policy discussions have already happened, theoretically. Anyway, so next step would be the floor of the assembly. So we're hoping it'll get out and be on the floor. So I think the letter that was shared in the packet of this meeting, it's pretty much as I had drafted it, and it's going to require, being addressed to someone. It might be best to just address it to the author, and the author can use it as they see fit. That might be the easiest way. There's also floor alerts that it could go into that form. What I popped into the chat, and I actually hit enter a little prematurely, that's the current registered support for the bill. There's no opposition on record. We didn't get our letter in time, so the Climate Center isn't on that list, but we support it. So that's the public list of support. And just, let's see, was that everything I wanted to say about it? Yeah, so that's where it's at.
So I'd just like to remind everyone of the process that we discussed last meeting, where for each item we have the presentation, then questions regarding the presentation, then we'll take public comment, then do our discussion, and then vote. So does anybody have questions for Woody? No. Okay. Do we have any public comment about this issue?
Well, this is not directly on the issue, but I tried to put things in the chat, and it doesn't accept chat. It's only direct message to individual people right now. So if that could be changed, like last time, we could actually
Are you not able to scroll up to where you see everyone in meeting?
No, there's nothing like that.
If Carrie, if you are able to work on that and see if that's something you can fix, but I don't know how to repair that in the moment. Jerry?
Yeah, let me see if I can change that.
And this is not to help, as you know, with the technical. This is a question for Woody. And the only question I had, and I went to go look it up, and I couldn't find it. The very first statement that Levine has in his reason for this is that powered vehicles are the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in California. I couldn't find that because I know here in this county it's over 50%. In the South Bay, it's more like 39%. So I was kind of surprised to see that statement. Do you know what the number is?
So there's a pie chart that the Air Resources Board puts out, and it's the sort of lower blue section of the pie chart. I can see if I can dig it up and share. I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
I think I have it fairly readily available. It depends on what you decide to attribute to the powered vehicles section, because there's passenger vehicles, heavy duty vehicles, light, off-road vehicles. Then there's the fueling support and the all that. So it depends on, there's several slices of the pie you could leave out and say that, oh, vehicles are only 28% of California emissions. Well, you can take into account some other things.
Yeah, because nationally, Zion and I keep talking about this book, and I look at the charts here. The percentage across the country is much smaller. I just wonder if California is different than the rest of the country as well.
Passenger vehicles is about 28%. Yeah. So, but then you add in all these other things, and it's just a scotch over 50%. I think if you really add in everything that should be added. I'll send you that pie chart. I'll send everybody that. I'll send the pie chart to people. I don't know how this works.
So, this is a common thing. No one knows how it works. It's all gotten confusing. So thank you for saying that, Woody. We don't have a designated staff member for the time being, except for Carrie, who, as we know, has many other jobs. So you can send things to me and I can be responsible for getting them out to the committee in a responsible Brown Act compliant way.
I think Carrie needs to have some hats so she can put a hat on so we can tell which one she's going to be.
I do have a couple. I can go grab one. No, and I will say, if you want, you can also send to Rebecca Mansour, the Planning Department's Senior Administrative Assistant, and ask her to distribute it to the CAC. And that is part of her, and she should be able to do that as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
And yes, I would appreciate it if you don't rely on me, because you don't want to see how many emails I get in a day.
Does anyone have any other questions for Woody or any discussion of this item? Luke.
Thank you so much. First off, I just want to say thank you, Woody, for bringing this forward. I just want to say first and foremost that I'm generally strongly in favor of adding electric vehicle charging infrastructure wherever possible. And yet I do have some concerns about this bill, largely just that it might create more problems than it actually solves for. I'm unclear, just reading through the bill, I'm a little bit unclear as to where a funding mechanism would come from for actually supplying multifamily dwelling units with charging infrastructure, whether it's a repair of existing sites or including that in new construction. So I'm a little bit worried that it might be an unfunded mandate and that there's no exceptions that are embedded in here for example, projects that might be urban infill sites that don't require large amounts of parking. I think, if something's smack dab in the middle of San Francisco, I'd rather see, no parking or fewer parking being saddled with the need for electric vehicle charging, for example. And additionally, I am just concerned about this bill on the basis of Assemblymember Levine's record, with all due respect to Assemblymember Levine, on housing policy itself, and just not necessarily always being a good faith actor for the needs of the people of District 10 or of the state of California in ensuring equity, environmental equity, in decision making. As you know, he represents Marin County, who largest decrease in housing permits that were issued last year, down to just 100 compared to with a county of about half population of our size, yet Sonoma County issued 17 times more housing permits. So just a lack of co-sponsors on this bill, and just a number of questions that I have with how this is actually going to be carried out, especially when we see much larger emissions in other forms of land use, particularly single family homes. I am in favor with the spirit of this bill, but I just have, I think, too many questions to be able to vote on it or recommend support. So once again, I just want to say thank you to Woody for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Luke. Jerry, did you have a hand up?
Well, first of all, it's really nice, Woody, that you have this other job because you get all of these and you have to look at these anyway. I'd like to support this. Not only Sebastopol, even Sunnyvale, in both of our building codes in the zoning, there's requirements for wiring for multifamily. And in almost every case, Luke, it is for new construction or substantial changes in construction. The caveat, so you know, and what do you know? For this year, I'm the president of the North Bay Electric Auto Association. So in a lot of cases, I push for a lot of these things. In our last meeting, discussion was, oh, wait, our previous president is moving to the South Bay. And he was talking about something called a DCC9. So I had to go look it up, find out, because I was talking about for all electric codes, we might need higher current going into houses. And he was talking about, and specifically for the place he's moving to, which is multifamily as well. Now there's devices where the cost is substantially less even for established facilities. But the point I would bring forward on this is before this gets passed, I'm pretty sure there'll be an amendment which says, okay, it doesn't, here's an exception, it doesn't apply to new construction. That would go in line with what most every city in California is doing. So this is somewhat redundant, and I like all of this going to the state level, mainly because if there are objections to it, they get fought by the state. And the second reason is at the state level, there's so much resource available to investigate exactly the kinds of issues that you're talking about. And then showing that, well, we need to have this exception. With Lisa and Kenna, I've been looking at REACH codes. And so I've looked at Sunnyvale's, which says adopt such and such a code. Here's the exceptions, like 25 pages of exceptions for their community. So I can see that the state will probably have this in there, and Woody has his hand up. He's probably going to say, yeah, that's what it says.
So Woody, do you want to respond?
Sure, and I'll try to be brief just to respond actually really to Luke's initial comments. I mean, it's so great question. It's a question around really every bill, and that's why there's an appropriations committee, and that's where the bill is right now to deliberate the fiscal implications of it and how it's going to be paid for. There is a massive state budget surplus, and there's a $1.5 billion budget allocation for EV infrastructure. So, you know, there's a number of possibilities there for how the state can help support the program. And I have not heard any or seen or read into it any indication that it's an unfunded mandate of sorts. And then on that, you know, the aspect of, I don't think there's a single member of the legislature that I agree with on every issue. And we work with a lot of legislators that have done some really bad policy in my view, but if they're doing something that's good, we like to support them. So I think this is actually, I think, a good bill. I think the sort of, you know, degree to which it's garnering support and flying through the legislature is indicative of that. And so I think in this case, it's good policy, and I would urge that we recommend to the city council that they support it. Thanks.
Is there anyone else that would like to bring up a discussion point about this item? Or lacking more discussion, is there anyone who would like to make a motion regarding this item?
Woody, why don't you make a motion?
I don't know that it makes sense for me. You know, I would be maybe better if someone else made a motion since I brought it forward.
Sorry, I'll argue with you about that. You brought it forward, and I think you should make the motion.
So I move that we recommend to the city council that they publicly support AB 965.
I'd like to second that motion.
All right, so Carrie, do you do this part or do I do this part?
You can go ahead and do it if you want to. That's fine.
So all in favor of sending this letter of recommendation to the council with our recommendation that they send it on to the bill sponsors, raise your hand.
And then for Alex, okay, he's got his hand raised. Thank you. Very innovative.
Carrie, are you counting? Or am I counting?
It looks like we have 9 in support.
All right, so then that motion passes. Thank you very much. And Carrie, I believe you take that on to the council as the staff member present since there's no council members present.
Yes, and so what we'll do is I will ask Woody to prepare the materials, for the proposed letter. Any edits, it doesn't sound like there are any edits from this group, but the letter that you'd want the mayor or council to sign. And if you can provide a brief introduction for that, then we can put it into the city council template and get it agendized.
Jerry, did you have a process point here?
Yeah, it's a process point. So unless we specifically ask a city council member to represent what we've said, is it fair for us to assume that staff, that's you today, we take that to the council? Take anything to the council once we prepared it for you.
Yes, correct. If this committee has voted on something, as you just did, to forward a recommendation to council, then yes, we'll go ahead and I'll let Mary, our city clerk, know that we want to get that added to the agenda at the next available agenda date.
Yeah,
I will note there is an agenda review committee, which is the mayor and vice mayor, and they have the ultimate decision on what gets agendized at what meeting.
And one of the things I would suggest is this: is if you wanted the committee to have a spokesman from the committee for the item, if you tell us that, then we can make sure we get a volunteer to do that.
Yes, I absolutely
Speaking for you, Kat,
just to speak to it. Thank you very much. No, I think that is Jerry, as you know, actually that's something I instituted with the planning commission when I started working here, was when a committee or commission recommends something to council to have, or if there's something appealed in the case of the planning commission, that there's a representative from that body to answer any questions or talk about any issues that council might want to discuss. Yeah.
Thank you.
And so I don't know if you want to appoint someone to be that person as a committee at this time. If it's Woody or not, I don't want to speak out of
I think we will need to know when it's on the agenda to see who can be there.
Okay.
So Jerry, is your hand still up for another reason? Okay. Moving on to the equity assessment working draft. Hopefully all of you had a chance to look that over. This is kind of round 2 of documents that the equity group has sent out. Woody, were you going to be presenting that as well?
I think I can speak to it a bit, but I think it would be good if, you worked on it, Kenna, a bit. And so hopefully you can chime in. I guess, do you want me to start? First, thank you to folks who sent in comments. And I don't think we fully addressed everything. And, we worked on sort of shifting it from this checklist where it would be sort of, a kind of a thing where it's from a checklist to something that's more along the lines of an assessment, and Kenna worked it into a matrix form. So it has now still the principles and then the matrix, and Dina and Dina's daughter Pauline had a suggestion about some 6 questions to ask, and I wasn't able to really fold them in, or I looked at it and they seemed different and distinct enough that I wanted to keep them separate. It seems to me like we might want to integrate those in a little bit more integrated way, and because right now they're just sort of standing out there alone. But I think that the matrix is heading in the right direction because it allows for the sort of the assessment and the comments I was just looking at it again before the meeting today, and it occurred to me that we might want to add some columns for, if some concerns are raised, what are the proposed mitigations or measures that could be taken to help address that? And I don't think that's sort of clearly in the matrix itself. So we might want to add some columns that, because right now it's just sort of comments. So, I think maybe some more mitigations. I don't know that I had much more to say about it. Kenna, do you want to? And I think it's Diana's the other person in our committee, but she's not here. So Kenna, you want to say something?
Yeah, so what the committee was thinking was that we didn't want to finalize this document at this time, especially given that our environmental justice seat is still open, and we'd like that individual to be able to weigh in before we create a final document. And of course, there's never a final document, but that we'd like to put this out as a draft version for the committee to use in the interim period. And that way we can continue to, like Dina used that part of the matrix while she was writing up her proposal. And that as we use it, we'll see where the strengths and weaknesses of the tool are, and therefore can revise the tool at some other time. But that we are hoping to officially get a thumbs up from the committee to adopt this as our working document, pending further iterations. Does anyone have any questions for the committee about the document? Jerry?
Yeah, and I particularly liked Dina's 6 questions. I'm not sure I like the precise questions, but I like the idea of the questions. Had you considered putting the questions at the front? Because the rest of it is the background as to why those are the questions being asked and how to answer the questions. So I think that there's some power in the questions being very much at the front and having that align directly with the matrix as well. And I like what you said just now about the mitigations. If you look at an EIR, SQL, whatever, when you find flaws and problems with something that you're making a judgment on, that's the very next thing that goes in. What are the mitigations that we believe belong here as a result of this particular problem? So had you considered about putting the questions at the front? And because I think that then it becomes it becomes what I think we wanted, what I believe we wanted for equity. That was, we're not doing things for equity. We're making sure that equity is part of everything. And so here's our measurements. Ask these questions. If you get no impact or positive impact, we're good. You got negative impact. What are we supposed to do as a result of the negative impact? And I think the matrix should have that too.
Anyone else have anything to comment about this or questions? Go ahead, Lisa.
Well, yeah, this is just a personal comment here that I think that second question that says, are we making this decision from a place of scarcity or fear rather than a place of abundance and courage? I really question what that's doing there. I think, I'm kind of doing a lot of this work because I'm scared, and that's what's motivating me. So I just really question, why is that question there? What purpose does it serve? And I would recommend that it go away.
Joshua, did you have your hand up, or were you just flashing a thumbs up? Okay. Jerry, I'm going to ask Dina to speak because she brought the questions forward. And then Jerry, if your question remains unanswered, we'll move to you.
The questions my daughter that is real involved in Sunrise shared from 350 Portland, and they're not meant to be like the questions. It was just what she was sharing with her comments. And on the positive, I want to compliment you on the ease of using the matrix. Thank you for redoing it into boiling it down to being very usable when I gave it a try. I know we're still working out what it needs to include or be different, but in the meantime, it was user-friendly. Thank you.
Great. Jerry?
So I had the same problem Lisa did with that particular one. I mean, it needed some, because I wasn't sure what it was saying. So here was my interpretation of it. My interpretation was, are we doing this to be positive, or are we doing this to be negative? That is, we're trying to promote something, or we're trying to stop something. And that I almost like as a question, because I find in many cases we put things in order to stop something, or we think we want something to happen. Our method of making it happen is to stop something that we don't want to have, as opposed to promoting something that we do want to have. And I find this in zoning, I find it in regulations, I find it in all kinds of different places. And I find that the reason that I think it's important more than the point of being positive versus negative is that when you do negative things, they work for a very short period of time. If you do positive things, they work forever because everybody wants to do it.
All right, thank you. Sonali, did I see your hand up for a minute?
Yes, there were two things. I was going to comment on something and then Lisa shared. And I guess maybe we could reword it, but my interpretation of that paragraph or that question was to look at it from a place of there's enough to share if we use our imagination and have openness, and not from a place of like, we have to make decisions because we're fearful. So I don't know, sequester resources for one particular group and not share for the whole. I guess that was like my mindset with it. And then with the equity piece, I'm just looking at our group, and in us making decisions, I'm looking that we are not a very diverse group with diverse representation. So we are making the informed decisions for those other groups. And I think that's a piece like that we might want to work into differently. And I know it was a piece when the committee was chosen that we were trying to fill certain seats, but we still haven't gotten there yet.
So Woody, I see your hand up, but I want to ask Sonali a question. So are you, Sonali, saying that the tool that we've developed does not adequately encourage inclusion of diverse voices in the process, or are you kind of more bringing it as a larger question? And if it's the tool itself, do you have a suggestion for improving it?
I appreciate the tool and I appreciate that being used in the framework, and I experienced Dina using it in her exploration for her proposal. I guess I'm more making a statement that we are making choices for these other groups, but we're not engaging them. Like if that tool had a way of engaging commentary from these other groups before we made is like some way of inclusion.
So I believe I'm going to let Woody, I don't know if you want to respond to that in particular, Woody. You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, actually, I wasn't going to respond to that specifically. I've been holding several thoughts from Jerry's first question about did we consider putting the questions up front. I think, I may have, I was the one that added them in. And I think that I put them where I put them. I decided I wanted to keep them intact and I didn't want to dismiss them or disqualify them, in part because there were ones like the abundance one that I didn't fully understand, and I didn't feel that I should unilaterally say, no, this input is, we're not going to, review it, because I don't understand all the dimensions of justice and equity. Can't claim to. So there may be reasons why that's a question, that should be asked, or something that should be thought about, and maybe unpacking it and understanding it better is important. And then I think I also wanted to say that we do have the tools now to reach out to other organizations to fill that equity seat that is unfilled. And I have sent out communications to about half a dozen different organizations and people so far. And I encourage everyone, in your networks, just spread that far and wide. There's the sort of cover letter we have, and then there's the materials that Rebecca shared, I believe, with everyone for folks to apply. So it's the EJ, it's the equity seat, it's a youth seat, and it's a Sebastopol business owner seat that are unfilled.
So at this point, I just want to make sure that we're including the members of the public and giving any members of the public a chance to comment on this agenda item. I don't see anyone trying to speak up around that. I see Jerry, your hand is still up. Is that still, or is that again?
That's again. From what Sonali said, I think there's something that probably needs to be added to the checklist, or to the matrix, or to the questions, or to both. Actually, I think the matrix and the questions should be one and the same. But for those impacted, have they been consulted, and how? I think that's what you were basically getting to, Sonali, right? Ken, I'm thinking about statements that you made in our meeting last week as well. Just testifying that, yes, we did consult, or no, we didn't consult, by itself is important. And certainly if you did consult, then what kind of response did you get? What kind of concerns did you have, et cetera, would end up being documented. If you didn't consult, then somebody has to figure out, okay, should we have?
So I'm starting to hear from the comments of the committee members that, because I think a lot of this commentary is addressing issues that we thought we were addressing with the development of the tool. So it's possible that we should bring the tool back into committee. We could either, at this point, I feel like we can either adopt it as is, as our working tool, and then provide feedback from as we kind of use it and grapple with it and say, you know what, this abundance question is just bugging me every time I have to do it. Or, after I did this 3 times, that abundance question suddenly made sense. So we could either adopt it as is, as a working tool, or we can kick it back to committee and say, you haven't gotten there yet to what we're willing to kind of grapple with. So I'm open to a motion in either direction. If anybody would like to make a motion, or if there's more discussion points, please let me know. Dina.
I interpreted your questions in the matrix as addressing at least partially what people are talking about. For example, there was a box that said, how has this affected group been involved in designing this project? And then there's another box asking about feedback. So that, to me, at least partially addresses what everybody's asking about right now. It depends how you use it, and depends if you need more, but I feel that you did try to address this.
Joshua?
Yeah, more or less to second that. I feel that somewhere in all of these pages of stuff that most people's concerns are mentioned at some point or another. And my sense is that this document has been built in a very additive way so far, that sort of every time we come back, there's a little bit more to it. At this point, it's starting to be a little bit confusing to me, or a little bit overwhelming to try to find the bit in there. And I would tend to echo the earlier comments saying, sort of the fundamental questions in the working matrix could maybe come up front, and then the paragraphs and paragraphs of principles and ideals can come a little bit later on to reflect into it. But I sort of feel that it's gotten to a point where it's maybe a little too thickly ornamented in there, and that could be reduced a little bit without wanting to, absolutely not wanting to cut out any of the important points in there, but just to say it's become a slightly unwieldy in this form. I personally don't need it to change much in order to try to work with it. So my suggestions are intended to be just in a development possibility that we try to make it a little more hands-on in that sense, and a little more simplified, if anything. Yeah, but that's just my personal take. And thanks for everybody.
So maybe we can just do a straw poll right now. Can I just get a show of hands of who thinks, oh, Jerry, I'm sorry, was your hand up? Your hand's down. Hold on a second. Let's do a straw poll really quickly of How
Okay.
many people think we should kick it back to the committee for some simplification, maybe reword?
Before you do that, let me just make one statement. I agree with Joshua. Okay, I like the matrix, and now I understand when I looked at the matrix, I can see exactly what I was saying. The questions are good, the matrix is good, and I think reconciling those two in the matrix leading would be easier document for me to work with. The rest of it is fill in as to, oh, you don't understand what we're talking about? Here it is. With that, then you'll understand what my straw vote will be. Go ahead.
So can I just see a quick show of hands of who thinks we should send it back to committee for some simplification before we adopt it as a tool? I've got 1, 2 hands, 3 hands, 4 hands. Okay. Can I have a quick show of hands of who thinks we should just adopt it now and as a working document and then sort out the kinks later? That looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can tell the committee members are tired of dealing with it. So would someone like to make a motion of adopting this? Or Jerry, you're going to tell me I have to make the motion?
No, you have a committee, whoever.
So moved.
Okay, so Luke is making a motion that we adopt this as a working draft for our use, pending revisement later once we've all worked with it a little bit. Alex, your hand is still up from earlier, so I don't know if you are asking for time to speak or you were just.
We're good.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so Luke has made a motion. Would someone like to second that? Such a quiet.
This is Alex. I'll second it.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks, Sonali. So all in favor of adopting this working document right now, please raise your hands.
I am getting 9, 4 again, 9 in support again.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So you all have your copies and feel free to write them up and send your comments as you go through the process to Woody, Diana, or myself for us to, do our revisions. So we are now to the point, I believe, Woody, when do you have to leave?
4:30, really, I would say.
Okay. So we have Dina's proposal for the community engagement next on the agenda. And then we have review the draft presentation to council, and that's probably all we will really have time for. I'm afraid we're going to need to table the issue about the PG&E smart meters to the following meeting. But I would like Dina to go ahead and review your presentation, please.
I don't know how detailed people want me to go, because you can look at bullet points if you look at the present proposal, and it's from our sequestration group. So it's myself, Sonali, and Joshua. And we filled out the matrix on one page. Did everybody look, or can they see it right now? Okay. And then there's some more background for people that want to know more about Park Village. So I'm in communication with the case manager that is from West County Community Services, and she serves the residents of Park Village that used to be homeless and helps hook them up with services. And there's also longtime residents there. So it's truly a low income kind of neighborhood in Sebastopol. And the case manager, Pat, is trying to come up with a residents committee. So it's not just us and her coworker, the family liaison, making a decision on collaborating together. So if this goes nowhere and there is no collaboration, then I don't think there's as much validity to this proposal. And basically our proposal at this time is to work on a work day in collaboration with the residents and the case manager. and use the opportunity to clean up the community garden on site a bit, plant some fruit trees that are there in pots, share information on the edible plants that are all around, and share information on composting. Their compost bin needs to be rebuilt, and share information on practices that you can use in gardening to sequester carbon. And I can stop talking because everything else is in front of you, or you have any questions for us. What we're asking is, if things keep falling into place, will you be supportive of one workday that might lead to more collaboration? And would any of you be willing to help with a little bit of the prep we need for this, or to show up and work with us?
So I just want to bring Carrie in for a process question right now. Since we're an advisory committee, the question that Dina is asking, how exactly does that kind of work into our role as an advisory committee?
Sure. So if you guys are interested in basically sponsoring, or as a group, volunteering to go out and do a volunteer workday as presented, that's not something that would require council approval. It is something that this group could decide on its own to do, take the advisory out of it, and just as a committee go forward with that. It's not something that, if it's a cost to the city or council support of something, then that's something that needs to go to council. But something like this, volunteer effort, I think the only thing that the city would require is signing a volunteer waiver form. And there are many people who organize volunteer events or things like that throughout the years, and that's the only thing that the city would require. And then obviously, coordinating with the Park Village management folks.
Thank you, Carrie. So Dina, just to clarify, are you asking for funding or for any kind of statement from council?
We would like to utilize what the city has to get the word out, which would be, I guess, their newsletter that goes out weekly, or maybe the website, or any other promotional avenues that I don't know about. I've heard from Carrie how we go about making sure we plant anything we plant in the right location, getting permission to do that and check in on that. I do really feel it's important to have collaboration and buy-in with the people that live there, not just us showing up to do something good, because it should be a relationship building thing. It should be like, hey, we're this climate action committee and we're starting to get out there in the public and do some outreach and build some collaborations, and hopefully in the process make some positive climate changes in our community.
Great.
And I would say for the newsletter, that is not a cost item. That's something where if you forward me a little blurb, I'll review it and forward it on to the newsletter, the city's newsletter person, and I do that for all the committees as needed. In terms of collaboration, so Dina, I know you said you talked to the case manager. There's also a resident manager there. Did you talk to him as well?
No.
Okay, and so he's probably the bigger person to, since he's kind of the site manager, he would definitely be a good person to talk to. I'm sure Pat can, the case manager can put you in contact, but I think in terms of making sure that it's a collaborative with the community that's there, that would be my advice to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dina. I saw Joshua and Sunali and Jerry have hands up at some point. Joshua?
Yeah, I don't have much to add at this point. Just to clarify that, yes, we would be coordinating with the city public works, and making sure that any site development was appropriate. The other concerns, and to summarize, I believe what's being asked for here is sort of general approval from the Climate Action Committee, including the ability to promote this as a sort of Climate Action Committee event. On that front, I want to refer back to our original bullet list of 6 duties that we were given by the city council, and one of them was create volunteer appreciation events and climate events. So, you know, organizing an event is still directly within our purview. Again, we're not asking for any obligatory participation beyond what people might want to volunteer here, and essentially just asking for assistance in putting the word out, presuming that we do succeed in setting a date for the event with the managers who are on site. Just that.
Sonali?
Everything Joshua said, and I think it would be great to have the city council sanctioning something like this. I think it bolsters the efforts.
Jerry and then Luke.
Okay, as usual, I'm not against the activity. I'm against the way that we're doing it. And as an individual, I would probably volunteer to help. Having the committee volunteer, probably not, unless the committee decided it wanted to do it as a whole. I believe this kind of thing and many other things that we talk about don't initiate with us, but instead start with a recommendation from us to the city council to sponsor an event that does blah, 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 blah. We will do all the work to identify what it would take to have that event and it'd be part of the pitch to the city council. At that point, the council says, yes, we support this event occurring. Whether there's funding involved or not, we could turn around and say there's no funding involved, and that's where it goes. And the reason I'm thinking that way is I think about how a planning commission works and how a sustainability commission works. All of those. The members of the commission, the members of the committee, don't go out and do the work. They identify what should be done, how it could be done, what organizations could do it. And then it gets sent as a recommendation to the city council for the city council, those who are elected, to now sponsor those things. We're not a volunteer organization that does public works. We're an institution that helps in bringing community picture and ideas to the council. And I think that's what our job is. I think doing all the front work for this was right. And then structuring it and pitching it to the council saying, we think there should be this kind of event and that the council should sponsor it. And they just sponsor it with their goodwill. But that's my position, as opposed to having the committee say, we're sponsoring. I don't think that's our place.
All right. Luke?
Yeah, I do want to briefly respond to that. Just in that I think our role as a committee also includes getting the public engaged in our work and making sure that the public is aware of the work that we're doing. So I don't think that we should necessarily operate with that lens. If there's an outreach opportunity that's going to bring the people of the city of Sebastopol in closer proximity to our work. And I think we should be looking for opportunities to establish public engagement wherever possible, because there's a lot of benefits in terms of the remote environment in which we've been conducting our meetings, but there also are a lot of people who aren't part of the conversation. And I think making this as broad of a tent as possible should always be an overarching goal of ours. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you to Dina for bringing this forward. I definitely would love to be involved with it. I think when the Park Village Garden was first set up about 10 years ago. I was out there on a work day, probably with you. I was definitely there with Pauline as well. So it would be great to come full circle on that. And I do have a question as well, just kind of procedurally for Carrie, just in regard to Governor's Order N-95-20, I believe, or whatever it was, in regard to in-person events. I know that there are a bunch of changes in the works right now in terms of mask mandates and everything else. I'm just sort of wondering how that applies to our public process in the Brown Act.
That's a good question. So, I'm familiar with the garden plots. It feels like there's probably enough room to do appropriate social distancing, and yes, that would be a part of mask required social distancing, those types of things as you're scheduling it. I don't imagine that it would be beyond the I believe it's beyond the number of people that are allowed, but that is certainly something in terms of working with the schedule. So the fire chief is the person who does those, looks at those requirements on a weekly basis. I also tend to, because I'm on a couple of, like a parks group and an economic development group where those are also discussed. But we'll probably be moving into the yellow tier in a couple of weeks, it sounds like. We did just barely miss it this week, so hopefully we're moving into that location. But in terms of, like, we have a community garden and people are allowed to go there and work in their community garden plots, just subject to the 6 foot and mask regulations.
Thank
So,
you.
but we can
You just-
confirm that, certainly based on when the date is actually scheduled for it too.
Okay, and just following up on that, would we, so if it were would this be considered a formal committee meeting if we were to do so, and would sort of the same rules for public noticing apply, or if it were, kind of
No,
a
not
public
if
event, I
you're,
guess?
yeah, thank you, Luke. Not if you're not discussing committee business, you're just there doing a project, that would be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for those good, excellent questions. Is there any more discussion that we need to have on this topic, or would someone like to make a motion? Oh, sorry. Do we have any public comment? I don't think we have any members of the public present anymore. So I will stop asking for public comment. Does anyone have other points to bring forward in this discussion, or go ahead, Joshua?
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the part of bringing it to the city council for some general form of approval or support, given that we don't have city council members here today, usually, and that I know there can be a timeline for getting anything like a formal approval there. Carrie, perhaps you're best positioned to comment on the notion. If we're essentially just asking the city council to allow us to promote it as a committee event via the city's web resources, do we need to go through more weeks of process on that, or can we just sort of kick it up the chain at this meeting? I'm not sure what's possible.
Yeah, so I don't think the city council can officially sponsor something without it going to the council, but I think this committee can sponsor it without the city council's permission. And I will note that, and I forget if it was Lisa who commented or Dina, but I was there for the discussions of when the Climate Action Committee was being formed by council. And one of the discussion points I do recall them discussing was having, a lot of climate issues, just like a lot of the nature shows you watch these days, they're great, but they're talking about the degradation of environmental stuff and all that kind of stuff. And they didn't want this to be just that. They wanted celebrations and positive events to be part of the Climate Action Committee. And I think this is actually a really wonderful component of that. And so I think this is, to me, this is aligned with the mandate for this committee. So it's within the scope of the committees, I guess, what my assessment would be of it. The other option is to depending on how long it takes you to organize it, to have this agendized next meeting as well, just to get Diana and Sarah's input on it. Again, they can't speak for the entire council, but they can at least as council members. But I can also, if Dina sends me an email about, hey, we're looking at this date for this, can you share with council members so they're aware of it? I certainly want to make sure council is aware of that the committee is doing this.
So I hate to cut off comment here, but we have less than 25 minutes left, and we have a presentation to the council that I would love to get some of your comment on. So at this point, we can either entertain motions for moving this in one direction or another, or we can table it till next meeting's discussion, at which point theoretically we will have council members present who may be able to address some of these issues. Does someone want to make a motion, Joshua?
I would like to move that we at least have a straw poll of general assent approval for this event to proceed further in the working group subcommittee.
So as opposed to an official motion, you're just saying, can we just have a straw poll?
I mean, I think if everybody, if enough people are on board, then that might become sort of an endorsement. It would be great if at this meeting we could move forward. I just don't want to force that issue if we're not there yet without taking a lot of time.
Go ahead and make the motion, and if it doesn't pass, then we'll table it to next meeting.
Thank you. I would like to make a motion that our committee approve this event being developed by the subcommittee, and seeking nothing more than the name of the Climate Action Committee, and general assistance with promoting it as an event.
Do we have a second for that?
This is Alex. I second the motion.
I second.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oops, sorry. So I got to restart. Alex just jumped around because he ran just his hand. 1, 2, 3, 8. We have 8 in favor.
Yes. All right, thank you everyone for moving that forward quickly. And thank you, Dina, for your hard work on that proposal, and Joshua for supporting her, and Sunali for being part of it. So I'm going to share my screen and get through this PowerPoint as quickly as I possibly can so that you have time to comment on it. So please know I will clean up the graphics. These are not final graphics at all. This is just a draft version. So report to City Council. So this slide shows the duties that the Climate Action Committee was given by the council. Alex, is your hand up because you want to talk, or is it just still up? So formulating a work plan, researching composition of duties of other subcommittees, updating the CAP, prioritizing the resolution attachment A, creating climate calendar, and creating volunteer appreciation events and ideas. And then so to go through those action priorities from Sebastopol Climate Action, they have the citizens group, the citizen group, which is confusing because we're the Climate Action Committee. So create a climate subcommittee, that's checked off, that's done. The City Council gets full points for that, and my slides won't advance there. So the other action priorities from the Climate Action were all electric reach code, municipal solar, moratorium on new fossil fuel infrastructure, oversight of procurement, data gathering, education, work to accelerate transportation electrification, and fund a grant writer or other funding. So our response to that list has been to form working groups, and these are the active working groups, or the ones that were originally formed, was funding, research, outreach, education, microgrids and energy, transportation, sequestration, social equity, and then the CAP models and metrics, which is double starred because CAP, which stands for Climate Action Plan, committee basically came to the point of understanding that developing a comprehensive CAP document requires more research and resources than this committee alone is able to provide. And the committee, so the status of that plan at this point is that the committee chair group is actively seeking support and advice from the council regarding a strategy for developing an effective CAP. So the topics and process in our working groups, and this is where I'm really hoping you guys can weigh in and let me know what I've left out. So so I've taken the list from the Climate Action Citizens Group and plugged it into what the working groups are working on. So from our original assignments to how we're addressing them. So transportation, working on the new fossil fuel infrastructure moratorium and acceleration of transportation electrification. The energy work group, all electric reach code, municipal solar, and they're doing a lot of data gathering. Education is working on community engagement and hopefully taking up the idea of a climate calendar. Funding, I don't know if funding is taking up this grant writer issue or is exploring other funding sources. So that's someplace I'd like some input. Research committee, I'd like some help knowing exactly how you'd like your work to be defined. And the equity committee is engaged with recruitment for the environmental justice seat and developing the equity principles framework. And sequestration has been working on a community engagement project. And not in process from our original task list is the oversight of procurement of sustainable purchasing for the city of Sebastopol. So we don't have anyone working on that plan right now. Progress that we've made so far, the Climate Action Committee has engaged in learning the scope, history, and context of our roles. We've made recommendations to the council to actively support climate-friendly legislation. We've adopted, as of today, a draft equity framework. We have formed active engaged working groups, which are tapping expertise from the broader Sebastopol community to assist in developing policy recommendations. And there is more to come soon with community engagement projects that are in process. And then what questions do we have for the council? Definitely want to ask them, are there particular areas of focus that the council would like to see the committee prioritize? And I don't know if this group has any other questions that they would like us to be addressing.
I don't think you can see hands while you're presenting, can you?
I can't, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Here,
I thought as much.
I'll stop sharing. Yeah.
There's only 9 of us. We could probably yell out. Joshua has his hand up right now.
Okay, thanks, Joshua. I have my printouts of all the slides here for me to rapidly take notes on what you guys want added or subtracted from that. Yeah, go ahead, Joshua.
Just to say, I feel like we do have a couple of questions or asks remaining for City Council. Specifically with respect to, for instance, the CAP process, kind of how can we get more support from the city and from other regional organizations? We found that our initial sources that we thought would support that process were not as robust as we had thought. And so that we're looking for input on that front. Also, that the council might consider giving us more staff support in some fashion. I don't know what that looks like. Certainly asking Carrie to take on our needs as well as everything else she's doing is not really feasible. So something like that. And finally, I had begun to ask whether we could enlist the research working group in assisting us with finding other CAP models and things on that front. And so, to mention that we're trying to put that CAP process together in another form. That's it.
Yeah, I'm hoping that some of those questions get answered with Diana and Sarah meeting with the chair group, maybe even prior to the 18th, but we'll see whether that comes to pass. Jerry, I see your hand up. I would like to see if Sarah Elliott has any responses, because she's been very quiet today.
I was about to raise my hand, but I only can speak for my working group, but maybe like the specific projects we're working on to make it easier for them to understand. So we could mention the community upcycling art project, and we could mention the garden project. We could say that they're still in the works, but they're definitely being worked on. So yeah,
thank you.
You should also mention we're starting a recruitment again for another junior member here, right? Replace
Jerry, was that what you had your hand up for?
No, I have my hand up for 2 other things.
Go for it.
One was part of what Joshua said. I think it's fair in the CAP portion to throw it back to the city council to look for alternative ways to staff, because it will require staffing to do a good job on the CAP and to maintain the metrics for the CAP over time, unless they expect that's to be part of the climate committee, in which case that's a large part of what the committee should be doing, not one of the 10 tasks. And to that end, also, there are possibilities. There's a lot of small communities in the county. Isn't there some way to get staffing across the communities? And we thought RCPA was that, but RCPA thinks that we're staffing them. So I think there's a disjoint. The other thing Zeno sent to me today was that the county has just approved budget for 3 staff members just to work on climate. So I don't think that's available to us, but that gives the council a hint as to how hard the work is, how much the work is, and how much expertise is required for the work. The other thing I would go back to is on I almost jumped in, the slide where you mentioned the energy group. I sent to you and Lisa today, along with the others working with us, that I attended the Climate Center's microgrid session today. That's going to be a working committee of about 40 people over the next, 8 to 10 months, putting together the paperwork and submissions and whatever else. So when funding comes available, that our communities could get microgrids. Now, many of the communities that I talked to today included communities with populations of 2,000. as opposed to 7,800, and certainly not the Sunnyvale 176, 178,000. So the kind of problem set we're working on is a wide problem set. I think it's fair to mention that, and that our approach, and I'm going to, if you and Lisa and I can talk about it, but I think our approach to tackling microgrids, rather than dropping it the way Cordell suggested we do it, is that we work through the Climate Center and their initiative to see what we can effectively do.
So you'd like me to add microgrids to what the energy group is?
Yeah, and then you can fill in that we're going to try to do this through the Climate Center, since this is, again, very technical.
So are there members of any other working groups that have some input into how you would like your working groups work to be represented? Lisa.
Yeah, the finance/funding group, I think our primary focus right now is working on a utility users tax proposal. So that's what we've been working on, a few different things, but that's our primary focus right now, and we're going to be bringing that forward. The other thing too is that it seems like with the electric reach code and cap stuff, that I wonder, does each city have to write their own cap? I mean, it seems like such a huge job. And I've always kind of thought, gosh, can't we just, kind of take advantage of what other people have already worked so hard on? And are we so different that we need something really from scratch? So
and Lisa, you saw we can, because one of the things I wrote to you about was on the reach code. I looked at what Sunnyvale did, and they took something, and then here's the exceptions. Go ahead, Kenna. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We can't really get into the weeds of this with our remaining time. We have 10 minutes left. And so the discussion right now is what we're presenting to council, not what our grand strategy for attacking the cap is. So we are clearly in need of a grand strategy for attacking the cap, and all voices welcome in that conversation. But right now, I'd really like to get back to like what is it that your working groups want to have representing you on, in terms of this brief report out to the city council of what objects you've taken up, such as my question for you, Lisa, is the funding a grant writer, which was kind of number one, is that something that you guys have on your radar to think about or discuss, or is that just kind of not in the funding committee? Is that inaccurate to say the funding committee is taking that one on?
We really haven't been focused on that. It's really kind of, I don't know where the city budget is right now and whether there's really room for hiring somebody like that. So we really haven't done much on that front.
Thank you. Any other work groups? Like Luke, do you have some input on the research, the roles the research committee a working group has taken up?
Yeah, it's a little all over the place at this point, but I will have some updates for you for sure, well before the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Jerry, go ahead.
It was just back to, so you can add this part from what Lisa said about the reach code, and just simply say, we've been looking at reach codes. We're looking at methods of creating the reach code, adopting it, and trying to leverage what others have done. And I think that's fair to say that. So we're trying to find a way that we can do it with the limited staff that we have and the limited resource we have.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything they'd like to put in? Joshua?
Thanks. Just on the sequestration working group front, we're trying to develop an inventory of city-owned or managed properties and look at them for issues and opportunities related to climate emissions.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Education, other than Sarah Elliott's request that we include the upcycling art project and putting the garden project on the sequestration committee and the art project on the education committee. Is the calendar that the is that something you guys are or are not working on? No one is speaking up for the education committee. Come on, you guys are about outreach. You got,
We have not worked on that, no.
okay. Is
I
that something?
suggest that just defining what that means would be another ask for city council, because this whole create climate calendar it's just kind of vast and
Yeah,
Yes.
maybe Carrie can explain that one, because I was confused by it too. I thought when that was on there that that was a work calendar for the climate committee, not that it was a climate calendar.
So, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Carrie, please.
I'm not positive what the intent is. My understanding was that it was about various events like Earth Day, the Volunteer Day, the events so that the community knew and could engage because they knew of what was happening in the community. So that was my understanding of it.
So I guess the beginning of that is the village project and the art project. And beyond that, I don't think we've worked.
Right, and like the city always has an Arbor Day where they plant trees. So that's a sequestration type of an event, that kind of thing.
Are you guys willing to take that up as part of your work group task list? Just developing that calendar?
Meaning like, what is that? I don't even know what that means. Like, would we put, is that a place that we list events to give to the city so they can put it on their website?
However we want to do that, of kind of saying, here's what we think the Sebastopol climate events will be. We've got Earth Day, we've got an event happening. Yeah, I think it's just maintaining the events calendar.
We can do that.
Great.
Yeah, and it is something that we can post on the city's website. My staff can do that.
Anything else that was missing or was there and shouldn't be there?
Are we doing anything with public transportation advocacy?
Well, that wasn't on our kind of assignment list. I'm not sure whether the transportation committee, go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, so we've discussed a little bit, just as in terms of establishing general priority areas, the continued electrification of public buses and looking into a municipal e-bike program. It's just been stated in terms of our priorities in some of our initial meetings at this point, but it is something that we're looking into in the transportation committee.
So would it be accurate for me to say like clean public transport options is on your list?
And Luke, if you can let me know when you're discussing those items, there's some relationship to, there's state law, SB 743 about vehicle mile traveled. And if people need to, I just attended a 5-hour training today about some of this stuff, but if projects need to do mitigations for some of their stuff, some of those mitigations could be contributing towards or sponsoring other forms of alternative mobility like e-bikes and things like that. So it is possible that there's some link in with privately done projects that need to deal with those types of mitigation. So there may be a good link for funding sources for that, not immediately, but as projects come forth.
Excellent, thank you. And I'll just add too that in the chair group, we discussed recently that, as the planning commission liaison, there's a lot of areas for cross-pollination, I think, in terms of representing this work to the planning commission, getting their input, and is a large reason why I'm on the transportation committee as well. So definitely look forward to continue discussing that with you.
Oh, thank you all. So we are now 3 minutes until time to end this meeting. I welcome anybody's kind of afterthoughts, 10 minutes after we end, you're like, oh, we should have said this, blah, blah, blah. Just send me individual emails about any more comments that you have about things we should present to council. And of course, you're all welcome to attend. And if anybody has a burning desire to do the presentation, let me know. We're tabling the smart meter letter, which hopefully you've all had a chance to read and think about. I have no chair reports at this time. I believe Joshua said he didn't. Luke, do you have any chair reports that you need to make? Okay. And we have no time for further working group reports or any of the other items on the agenda, unless someone has something that they specifically would like to say we will add to next week's agenda other than tabled items, next 2 weeks agenda. Other than
I do have just one announcement. I don't know if it's I believe the city council is obviously they're having the relaunching Sebastopol today, but next Wednesday at 9:30, I believe they're scheduling their annual or biannual goals and priorities session. And I believe the last time we had that at city council, I believe there were some folks they're advocating for some of the climate action type items. So I just want to let this group know about that meeting. It should be announced and posted to the city's website tomorrow or Friday.
All right, great. So anybody that's available on a Wednesday morning at 9:30, it'd be great to have our voices in their room. So Joshua, quick review of action items.
So far as I can tell, we pretty much moved everything ahead. What I saw is that Woody and Carrie were going to take the AB 965 letter onto council in whatever formatting that needs to happen. The equity framework was sort of not punted back to working group, but put forth for everybody to contribute to. Comments to in the future, and that's all I have. Though if anybody else feels like they took on a job, now would be a great time to chime in as well.
All right, thank you all so much. Carrie, is there anything that we should add before we adjourn?
I can't think of anything. It was a great job running the meeting.
All right, thank you guys so much. Thank you for all your comments and look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.